My name is Rachel Perlmutter. I'm with the Art of Online Marketing, and we're going to be talking about how search engine optimization can help you grow sales and leads for your business. And Chris Sullivan is our Director of Search Engine Optimization, the expert who will be digging into the fine details to make sure that we help you understand really what's working and what's not when it comes to this unique technology to make the most of website traffic. So we're going to cover things like what is search engine, what are search engines, what are examples of the popular ones, and what do the statistics mean, what's an SEO algorithm. SEO stands for search engine optimization. Really things to consider when putting together a good SEO strategy. What does ranking factors mean? Why are they important? And just basic tips. So we'll be talking about all of that. High-level conversation, when we think about a search engine, everyone says, I'm going to Google that, because Google really is the most popular search engine today. But back in the day, Alta Vista was really popular, Ask Jeeves was really popular, MSN was really popular, and Yahoo and AOL. Chris, today, besides Google, are these search engines really still being used all that much?
Not really, not all that much. I mean, I think we all know that Google is the king of the market, and they're at about, just shy of 70% of the market today. And then you have Yahoo, who has a little bit, and MSN is now known as Bing. It's the same search engine, but it's called Bing. And those two account for probably, close to 20%. These other folks on the bottom there are maybe 3% of the market. So it's Google by far, and then Microsoft and Yahoo quite a bit behind, and those are your three top players.
So if someone does a search on AOL, how does that work? I'm just curious.
So that would be if you went to an AOL homepage, or if you used AOL as your email. There are different places where you can find their search bar, and to be quite honest with you, their results are Google's results. They just feed the Google search results into their into their user base. So even though it would show as AOL and they're using AOL, they don't have their own algorithm. They just use Google's results.
That's what I was wondering. So really, it's Google, even if it's AOL. Thank you.
It is. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let me come back here. And so this, I'll let you explain this. I think you pretty much just did, but.
Yeah, and that's just a line chart look at how the market share works and how it's gone up and down. But, the most important thing to realize there is that Google is far and away the leader in the market, and nobody has come close. I think that at this point, nobody will as far as a search engine. I think that what you'll see happening in the future will have more to do with places like Facebook and Instagram and that type of stuff. But as far as search goes, really worldwide, Google is the top player, and there's no reason to believe that they won't always remain there.
All righty. Well, let's just talk at a high level how search engines work. I'll let you kind of touch on each of these points.
Sure. So, at the highest level, what we know is that if I want a product or service and I don't know who I want it from, I'm going to go to type in google.com. I'm sorry, I'm going to type into the search box, whatever it is I'm looking for, and I'm going to hit search. I'll get 10 results on the first page. I'll get some paid ads on the side, and then I'll click on, one or two or three of them and decide who I'm going to buy from. That's the highest level. So what happens? Where do those results come from? How do they get there? Is kind of what we're going to take a peek into today. And the best way to look at it is that Google, and we'll speak particularly to Google here for our purposes today. The other ones work very, very similarly. There are some nuances that are different, but for our intents and purposes, we'll refer to Google today. So basically what happens is that we have, millions, if not billions of web pages across the web. We want to look at a website as not necessarily a holistic entity, but as a series of pages, okay? And so what Google does is it has it's an algorithm. It's a mathematical algorithm. It's referred to as a spider, sometimes a bot. And what that does is it goes out amongst all of the interlinking web pages on the internet, and it puts them into what's called its index. And the best example I've heard over the years is to picture this index like a library. So the bot goes out, it finds all these pages, it brings it back into its library and puts these all on the shelves. And then what happens is when a search request comes in, it needs to pick out what the best results are and then return them to its pages in order of what they think the most appropriate results are. Google's mission statement is pretty simple. It's that it wants to return the best possible search results to its users. Okay, and we always tell people, keep that in mind, and then you can understand how a search campaign works. So if we were searching for, let's just use widgets as an example. I type in widgets in Los Angeles or something, and I get there are 400,000 pages that deal with that. There are 400,000 results in this library or index. Google has to figure out which of them are the most appropriate. So we jump down to point 3 there. They basically go in there and search their own database after the user searches. They put them in this index, and then they go back to the index. So it's not a real-time thing that's happening. It's this index is already set, and they redo it a couple of times a week. It depends. They change it, but it happens pretty often. And then the search engines rank the resulting documents using their algorithm by assigning various weights and ranking factors. So as an example with Google, they take into account over 200 factors on each individual web page that they show back in their results pages. So in other words, what that means is that I have a web page, and on my web page I have pictures, I have title tags, I have code, I have forms, I have all kinds of stuff on there. And there are 200 things Google looks at in order to rank these pages in the order it thinks is most appropriate. Now I'm going to introduce a word, and that word is authority, and we're going to come back to that word over and over during our conversation today. What Google looks at is how authoritative your page is, or your site. We'll look at it as pages, but how authoritative are you? Are you more authoritative in your market than your competitor is, and the other competitor and the other competitor? There are 10 spots on the first page of Google. So how do you get into those? Well, you need to be an authority in your market, and there are a lot of ways to accomplish that. Search engine optimization basically deals with a lot of people want to use the word manipulating. I don't like that word. Basically, we're giving the search algorithm what it wants in order to view our sites and your sites as authoritative in their markets, and therefore boost their ranking when somebody does a search for what you do.
All right. So just coming back to some of the key points that I wanted to pull out. Number 1, your website pages are not real-time, searched real-time. So when you go in and you make a change to your website, a lot of people think that Google's going to see that immediately. There's a chance it will, but it just happens to be if it's timed when Google's going to go and index your page, meaning look at it again and then put it in its database. If they just did that and you make a change, you have to wait for the lag time between when they come and they look at your page again and when they last looked. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing is, with over 200 factors that Google's considering for each page, when we talk about how we're going to help you optimize your search engine optimization on this webinar, just keep in mind that we can't address all 200. So we're going to talk about the ones that we think you can influence and that are going to pay you back. Okay? So when we look at just in general where searches are happening right now, you can see that Asia Pacific is the majority of them, which is using actually other search engines rather than Google as their primary ones, right? Like Weibo and other ones. Is that right?
Baidu is a big one. Yeah, yeah, they have other ones. Google is a small market share in the Asia Pacific market, actually.
But they're bigger in Europe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So they're big pretty much everywhere except for Asia. So if you're doing international, if you're doing international business, you still really want to focus on Google unless it's Asia. And then, the principles we're teaching you are still as beneficial, but you would be also catering to other search engines. Okay. So, Chris has already kind of talked about why is SEO so important. And the bottom line is this. If I know I need to buy something or I want to take advantage of a service, but I don't know who I want to get that from or where to find them, then I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to type in whatever that service is. So if I need an emergency pet hospital, I'm going to go and type emergency vet or emergency pet hospital. I'll either put my zip code or my city because I want the closest one to me, and then I'm going to see what comes back. After that, different criteria are used by different people. So some people may be looking for star ratings. Some people may just be looking for hours immediately. Some may just be looking for the phone. Maybe they have an exotic pet and they'll type in exotic pet hospital, but they're looking for whatever that criteria is to help them decide that, yes, I want to take the next step with that business. If you don't show up at the top of those search engine results when someone puts that search in, then you miss that opportunity for that prospect to find you. And without doing search engine optimization, it's almost impossible to show up on that first page and certainly towards the top page unless you are in such a unique niche that you have next to no competitors, and that you're really kind of the only game in town for Google to find, which is pretty hard to do these days. So since 80% of consumers are, 75 to 80% are using Google, 80% including Yahoo and Bing, you really want to go ahead and optimize for those sites. And 90% of people will, when they're doing these searches, pick the site listed towards the top of the search results on the first page of the search results. If they're not finding what they want, or some people might be looking for a painting contractor and Home Depot comes up and they don't want Home Depot, then they'll just skip that even though Home Depot's at the top. But otherwise, whoever's at the top usually gets the attention. And really, 85% of almost all traffic is still sent to websites from search engines. The rest is coming from social and other referral sites, and then direct traffic when someone already knows where they're trying to go. Cost-effective advertising is, in my opinion, search engine optimization over the long run is the most cost-effective advertising that you can do for people who are ready to buy. I'm not saying it's the only cost-effective advertising and the best in all situations, but for people who are ready to buy and don't know necessarily who you are, forgotten your name, but know what they need, it's definitely cost-effective, and you can measure the ROI on it. And whether we talk about SEO or whether we talk about websites in general or marketing in general, there's really one principle that SEO and marketing is dependent upon when we talk about digital marketing. You need to have a really good conversion site so that when you send people there, it has the ability to get them to either call you or email you or buy from you or take whatever that next step is. If you have that, then you want to send traffic to it because when you send qualified traffic, you're likely to get a sale or you're likely to get a lead. But if you don't have a good conversion tool, you really don't want to spend money doing PPC, which is pay-per-click advertising, or SEO, or Facebook ads, or anything else, because that money is wasted. So everything we're going to talk about when it comes to driving traffic is contingent upon the fact that you have a landing page or a website that is a compelling conversion tool for your prospects and customers. Now I'm going to pause for a moment and say, if you have questions, you're welcome to type them into the question box. You have a little GoToMeeting bar on the right side of the screen, and there's both questions and there's chat. So you can type into either, and periodically throughout the presentation, I'll be checking both. And if we can take questions as we go through, we'll try and do that. And if not, we'll tackle them at the end. Okay? So there we go. So what is search engine optimization? Chris, I know you can say that much more eloquently than me, so please take it away.
Okay. So what is SEO? At its most basic is kind of how we want to look at it. And there are really, at the most basic level, there are two sides to search engine optimization. And one is what we call on-page search engine optimization, and the other is what we call off-page search engine optimization. We'll start with the on-page. On-page means exactly what it sounds like it means. It means it has to do with the pages of your website themselves, on the pages. So I alluded before to the fact that you might have code, you might have pictures, you might have content, you might have some internal linking, all that kind of stuff. That's what we're talking about when we mean on-page search engine optimization. And to be quite honest with you, it's probably the easiest part of SEO, but it's very, very important. Without it, your site won't rank well anyway. You can get them to rank okay, but not up into the first page and up into the higher areas of the first page. So there are a list of items, and again, it's about 200, but there are 20 or 25 that are extremely important. And there's a certain way in which Google's algorithm reads every web page, and there are certain items that it's looking for, and if those are incorrect or if those are done improperly, then your website's not going to rank well, to the point where you might end up being penalized by Google, and we'll touch more on that a little bit later. But you've got to be careful how you do the on-page stuff. It used to be, and I think everybody will remember this, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that you could take your website and you could take whatever your main keyword was and say it 50 times on the web page and you'd rank well. That doesn't work anymore, and Google hates that. They consider it spam, and they will penalize you for it. So you've got to know how this on-page stuff works, and that's just knowing how the algorithm works. At the end of the day, those of us that do SEO, what we know is how the algorithms of these various search engines work, because we're around them every day and we've been doing it a long time. And the only way to get to know how these things work is to watch them over a period of time and run tests on them. We're constantly testing. Most of what we do is testing. And we try to do things to get penalized. We try to do things to rank better with our group of test sites. And so therefore we know before we do anything with client sites how the search engines are likely to react when we do them. So that's on page. So again, things like your title tag, things like your header tags, things like your alt image tags, your code in the background comes into play there. All that stuff that has to do with the pages themselves. That's on page. And then when we switch over to off page, basically means other sites that link to yours. So we go back to the old way of looking at this, and really it's like a popularity contest. The more sites that Google considers to be important sites that point back to you via a link, the more popular Google thinks you are and the more authoritative Google thinks you are. And then we're back to that concept of authority again, where, okay, so I search for widgets. Wow, this site has a lot of sites that I respect pointing to it. Therefore, that means I'm gonna rank this site well. And it really can be as simple as that. The trick to it is knowing which types of links to use, when to use them, and how to sort of create them and build them and find them and all that kind of stuff. It's a large time-consuming process, and it's the part of SEO that most people don't understand, and it's the part of SEO that most people get in trouble with if they don't understand it.
I'm going to pause you for one second.
So again, we'll touch.
Yeah. Yep. One of the things that happens, I get them all the time, are emails of people offering to sell me links. And telling me that, oh, we're going to sell you a bundle of 30 or 300 links for, $15 or whatever to help you with SEO. And the thing about it is those links, if they don't have good authority or if Google doesn't like them, worst case scenario, they just won't help you. Best case scenario, they will help you. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. Best case scenario, they'll help you, although how much for $15, I don't know. But for worst case scenario, if they're bad links that Google doesn't like, they'll actually hurt your website. So it's just really important to understand where you're getting your links from and what Google thinks of those places before you say yes. And a question I get a lot, Chris, that if you could briefly touch on is, I have people who are offering to trade links with me, or I have people who are telling me to link out to them. Does that have any value for people, or does it hurt people in any way for their SEO?
It doesn't have value anymore. Early days of SEO, back when I started doing it, that was how you did link building. You would find other people in your industry and trade links with them and stuff like that, and it worked great. Google doesn't really like that anymore. It's not that it would hurt you. It can in certain instances, but it's certainly not going to help you, and it can make your link profile, which is sort of that holistic piece that Google looks at off page. It can make that a little bit messy and stuff like that. So we kind of advise against that, unless it's a very specific circumstance. You want one-way links that are coming into you. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't be linking out to other people too. I mean, a nice little SEO trick is, if you can link one of your pages out to a site that Google thinks is a huge authority site, something like Wikipedia, something like your local chamber of commerce, that can give you a little SEO boost. But again, you don't want to be just going out and trading back and forth.
Okay, so trading doesn't help, and a ton of outbound links willy-nilly doesn't help. It's really, again, knowing the value of that
Right.
link in Google's eye, and then linking to it because it has a lot of value. But I mean, if you are a company that has, you know, partners or you're a distributor, and then these are stores that, you know, people can buy your product at and things like that, it's fine to go ahead and share that information in those people's links.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just
Yep.
use
Absolutely.
strategy for SEO isn't going to help. So. Okay, so real briefly, I just want to share kind of, you know, I put in this restaurant delivery near me as a search in Google, and I just want to take you through what showed up. So, you know, there were 79,600,000 potential results that could have showed up on the top of the page. Now, what did show up is you can see ads, right? So see this little square, and then it says ad, and then the same thing here. So the first thing I got were a couple ads, and you'll know that you're looking at an ad because you'll see that. And also, if you run an ad, just know that people will see that it's an ad that's being run the same way. The next thing that showed up, because there are, in this case, local businesses that go on what's called a map listing, were some local restaurants near me. Now, there were more than this. I just cut it off so that I could put more on the page. But so typically you'll see a map in a local area, and then you'll see the listings for that. If there's Google reviews, which also do help with SEO, and Chris, you can talk a little bit about that more later, those will show up. And then underneath that is what we call the organic listings. So these are map listings, these are organic listings, and on the prior slide are the ad listings, and those are the order that they appear in. So I guess before we jump in, is there anything you want to add do you want to explain maybe what we're seeing here? You know, what comes up in a listing so that people understand where this is coming from?
Sure. So what you're seeing here, and the organic listing is what we're talking about when we're referring to SEO, in order to show up in these listings, and we'll get to this too, but the reason that you want to show up there is because about 80% of people click on the organic listings as opposed to the other listings that are available. But what you're seeing here is the top, you know, that's in the blue that they pull, that's pulling generally. Again, everything needs to be generally because not everything is exact here. It's not an exact science, and a lot of times Google does what it wants when it feels like it. So generally speaking, that is your title tag, okay? So that's what your web developer or your SEO person, or possibly even yourself, put in WordPress or whatever else it might be as your title tag. That's what you're going to see there. The green is the actual URL.
I'm just going to say your title tag for this specific URL. So
for that page.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yep, exactly. And then below that is your description tag. And this is where Google gets a little finicky sometimes. You can specify what you want listed as your description tag, but it doesn't always pull it. So in a lot of cases, you'll see it just pulling text off of the web page itself. But, you know, you can specify, you know, it's more of a suggestion. So it's one of the two, but that's called your description tag is what you're seeing below there.
Yeah.
And description tags can be good depending on what your products are. That, you know, we always say that will help your click-through rate. I mean, if you're showing up on page 1 of Google, you're in good shape anyway, but there are 9 other organic listings there. And in order to stand out, one of the things that you can do is that you can use this description tag to, you know, we tell people to put their phone number in it, or if you're having a special, or you know, it's that concept of what differentiates you from your competition. Put it there, and ideally that'll help more people click on you than they will the other listings.
And you can see this is only about, what, 60 characters, a little bit more than that, 80 characters?
Yeah, give or take. Yeah, 60 or 70 in there, yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny, I was just talking to someone the other day, and she said, you know, I had put something in the description area, and then when I went back and found my listing, it didn't say that anymore. It changed like 2 days later.
Right.
And you just explained
and that's
why.
Google being Google. Yeah.
Google being Google. So, okay, so then what exactly is an algorithm that, you know, and how does it apply to this conversation?
Sure. So, you know, the algorithm is a mathematical, you know, set of rules and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm not a mathematician, so I'm not going to have a great description of that for you. But the way it works as SEO is concerned is that they all have them. And the top point here is probably the most important. Only select employees of a search engine know for certain how these algorithms work. The rest of us don't know. And I'll touch back on what I said before. We know because we've been around it, we test it, and we know how it reacts by testing it, okay? So if you're talking to somebody about doing SEO for you or consulting you or whatever the case may be, and they tell you, well, I know how this works, and they don't. Only people and it's only a select group of people inside of, let's say Google, who know it. There's a search team. There aren't that many people on it, and they're very, very quiet. They don't talk about it for various reasons. But the rest of us, again, you have to test it, and I find myself stressing this more and more as Google, because it's becoming much more complex. They're bringing a lot of artificial intelligence into the algorithms, and really, so the only way that you can know how it's working is to test. If I had one question, and we'll talk about this later too, but I would ask people, how do you know what the algorithm is doing? Like, what lets you know that? The answer is testing. I mean, that's the only way to know for sure how it works, other than being a part of this inside team, which none of us are. So there's that. Reverse engineering research and experiments give SEOs, that's what we are referred to, search engine optimization professionals, SEOs, we get a pretty good idea of the major factors and approximate weight assignments of the algorithm. And again, back to those 200 different factors. The SEO algorithm is constantly changed. This is something that I cannot stress enough. And this is where most people fall victim to Google, is that this thing is changed, tweaked, and updated constantly. It used to be that you'd read in the news or on a blog or something that Google did a big update and a lot of sites were penalized, and that would happen once every year or two. But these days, in some cases, multiple times weekly. Over the last 3 weeks, we've seen 4 changes per week in the last 3 weeks. So, again, the only way to understand it is to test it consistently. We know that something is changing when we see sites moving around. It's a very fluid process. A lot of people think that, okay, I'm going to do SEO on my site. You'll get me up onto page 1. My site will be there, and it'll stay there forever. That could not be further from the truth. This process is completely fluid, particularly when Google is making changes to its algorithm. So it could be, and is the case daily almost sometimes, and especially over these last few weeks, like I mentioned, where you'll look at, whatever your keyword is, you'll see yourself where you want to be, and then you go back 10 minutes later and you're 30 spots down, and then half hour later you're back up. So there's actually a term for that we use. It's called the Google dance. And it happens in 2 instances. One is when they change their algorithm, and the other is when you make a change to your site. So if you change anything on your site, or you add new links, or you change some of your links that are pointing into you, it will react, and your listing will move up and down. So again, that's sort of our flag that goes up when we see these listings moving up and down, and we watch them in real time, obviously. But then we know, okay, something might be afoot here. They may be changing something with their algorithm. We'll take a group of our test sites and start doing different things that we think might impact it, and then sooner or later we can zero on exactly what it is they did and what they changed. So you really have to be doing that. So I guess the point there is that getting a good ranking to begin with is really just one little part of the battle here. Keeping it and being consistent with it is really what SEO is all about.
Well, and
websites and docs. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to add to that too. I mean, so to rank towards the top, Chris is talking about this algorithm and how it's constantly changing, and understanding what is working now. I mean, that's what it comes down to. What's working now? Because Google's constantly trying to make sure that their users are getting a great result, and so they don't want to be gamed or scammed, and so they're looking at what SEO people are doing that's not in line with what
right.
With what they want, and then people who are trying to work around the system by not giving good results, but by just playing a game, are what those algorithm corrections are about. So that's something that we all have to be aware of just to get to the top. If you start to fall, it could be, the issue of the algorithm changing, or you making changes to your website that haven't been indexed properly. But the other thing that will cause you to fall is if you have a competitor who's very aggressive in working to get past you, and they do that by adding more links, from high quality sites than what you have, and that will generate, where they can basically in time surpass you. So that thought of, once I get to that top position, 1, 2, or 3, I'm there, I've made it. It's, congratulations. Now the battle begins to hold on to that position. So. um, uh, looking at, just the way that the internet is showing up as far as a competitor to ad spend when it comes to what used to be the most popular way to advertise, which was television. You can see over the years it's changed dramatically, and it's anticipated to continue changing. So television has become very fragmented, where it used to be if you were on one of the main channels, then you were getting a large portion of any eyeballs and ears that were watching television. And then suddenly cable came in and splintered it. And now with Hulu and Netflix and YouTube and all these other competitors, television viewing has been significantly diluted, and that per individual station. And so now the great thing about doing digital advertising compared to television advertising is you can really hone in on a specific type of person that you're trying to reach. If your market is dog owners between the ages of 25 and 35 that are female and all that, you can really do some very specific targeting through digital ads. And so what you're noticing is that really it's understood that people are spending more time online than they are watching television. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, to me, it's just fascinating to look at. And the only thing I would add is that it applies very much to print media also. Although we don't have the exact numbers up here, obviously we know that print has taken a big hit, as far as digital in the last 10 years. And so, with more people coming in and spending these dollars on digital, that tells you that your competitors are there. People are now really starting to rely on this as a major form of their marketing budget. And so I think you got to make your decisions based off of that.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I just want to ask, I got a message here that our sound went out temporarily. If that was the case, can you just type yes in the chat box? And I just want to know if that was for one person or if that was for multiple people. So if your sound went out for a moment, can you just type yes in the chat box? Okay. So I think one person was just maybe their internet connection was interrupted. So we're going to keep going. All right, so now let's talk about, we talked about how important it is to do the right things and what the results are of doing the right things. Now let's talk about what the right things are. So again, Chris, I will let you take this away, seeing that this is what you talk about all the time.
Sure. And again, I want to keep this high level. I don't want to get too technical with all this stuff. It can get very, very tedious. But there are steps that if you look at, what successful SEO campaigns have in common, you'll notice that they sort of fall into a series of steps, and we've tried to outline those here. So the first thing is that you want to research desirable keywords and search phrases. It's probably the most important thing that you can do, and that's because if you have the wrong keywords and you go and you do this big SEO campaign, your site shows up for these keywords, but A, nobody searches for those keywords, or B, it's the wrong group of people searching for them, then you've wasted everything. So I can't stress enough, if you're going to do SEO, whether you do it yourself or whether somebody does it for you, the keyword research part should take a little bit of time, and you should have multiple passes at it, and you should start with a big list and narrow it down and take into consideration a lot of things. You want to take into consideration what your competition is doing. You want to take into consideration the number of people that search for each phrase each month and those types of things. And to that end, there are many keyword research tools available that will help you to understand what searchers are actually searching for. Here are several examples here. You can also go to Google and type in keyword research tool. There are a lot that are free. Those aren't as good usually, but there are a lot of these here are very, very affordable and provide invaluable information. So identify search phrases to target. Obviously should be relevant to the business and to your market. They should be obtainable as far as competition, and that's an important one as well. And what we mean by that is, if you're somebody that has an online store, let's say, and you sell a particular type of shoe, you don't want to be going after the term shoes, because you're going to be up against the biggest companies in the world, who are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on search engine optimization, and you're not going to beat them for a keyword like that. What you want to do is you want to find keywords and phrases that are a little bit less competitive but still have a good amount of traffic. There's a nice balance in there, and no matter what your market is or your niche is, there's always a group of keywords that will fit that criteria, and those are the ones you want to go after. And then finally, you want it to fit the profile of a buyer keyword. A lot of times people fall into the trap of the tire kicker syndrome, where somebody wants information on something, or they want more of they're not a buyer. So there are certain keywords that are going to be more typical of what a buyer would type in, and you want to try to focus on those as well. So that's the first part, and again, I would spend a whole lot of time on that. Make sure you have that perfect and all of those things are covered before you take the next step, which would be looking at the website itself. And so this gets into that sort of concept of on-page optimization that we talked about before. And most SEO companies and consultants would tell you this is exactly the steps that they take here. And so we'd start off by cleaning up and optimizing website's HTML code for appropriate keyword density, title tag optimization, internal linking structure, headings and subheadings, images, page load speed, etc. So that's a very tiny list of, that's included in that list of 200. So something like keyword density, that's where I mentioned where you used to be able to stick your keyword in there 50 times. You can't do it anymore. You've got to be cognizant of how many times your competitors are using that particular keyword on their pages. That gives you a good idea of what's going to be acceptable to Google. There's not a hard and fast answer to any of this really. Title tag optimization. If I had to pick one, I'll give you another tidbit here. That's probably the most important thing you can do for your website, to have your title tag optimized properly. Again, that's that big blue thing that shows in the Google search results. It's fairly easy to change on your site. You want to have your keyword in your title tag. You don't want to repeat it. You don't want to just, you don't want to, let's go back to the shoes example. You don't want to have blue shoes, red shoes, green shoes, yellow shoes. You don't want to repeat it over and over. You do want to have your keywords in your title tags. Ideally, you should be targeting, 2 keywords per page on your site, maybe 3, if you know what you're doing. So those are things to keep in mind. As far as internal linking structure, that just means how does your site sort of relate to itself? How are your pages connected to each other? The proper way to do that would be to have your home page, which is a little bit more general, and then have specific pages for specific services or products that you offer. They should each have their own page. And what you should have is you should have links from the home page to each of those pages using the keyword in the link. We call that anchor text. So if I were doing blue shoes, I would have a link that said blue shoes, and that when I clicked it, would take me to the page that said blue shoes. And then from there, you can have one of several different ways of linking to subpages of that, and you can go down as far as you like. The deeper you go down in linking structure, the less likely the pages are to rank. But if you're at, the home page being level 1, you got a subpage level 2, and then a subpage level 3, all of those pages should be able to rank without a problem if this is all done properly. Headings and subheadings, very similar to your title tag. Your headings are sort of, when you have paragraphs on the content side of the website, and you'll see the one that's in bold, that's a heading. We call them H1, H2, H3, H4, H5. The H1 is the one we like the most, and again, it should contain your keyword. That would probably be the second most important item right there. So it would go title tag, then H1, okay? Images, again, you want to be able to name the image, what your keyword is. There's an alternative text that you can use for images. Have that be your keyword. Page load speed, very, very important with Google right now. Google, when they send that spider through, they're not interested in a website. If their spider hits it and it takes 10 seconds for the page to load, you're not going to be put in the index. So you really want to concentrate on that. And again, there are a lot of tools out there, these sort of page load tools for free that you can just look up on Google, run your site through it, and it'll tell you it's good or it's bad or it needs work or whatever it might be. And there are a lot of things you can do to fix that. And that's a pretty important one too.
Yeah, what do you think the page load speed, like at max, should be?
Well, it depends. I mean, if it's something that Google knows is a big e-commerce site, there's a big catalog attached to it, it'll give you a little bit more. But I mean, no more than 2 seconds maybe would be good. I think you might start having some trouble after that.
Okay, so and the other thing is the report cards will also tell you,
They will.
Whether that's acceptable or not. And different report cards actually use different numbers. But from an experience perspective, people now do have this expectation of instant gratification. So you really do want to try and be in that 2-second range. I mean, you can go 4, you can go 5. It's not it's not going to stop them from ranking, right? It's just not going to be as good an experience. So
right. So it really falls under one of those factors that they look at, but it's an important one. So yeah, you want to be aware of it. It's an easy thing to fix as well. So
yeah,
yeah, keep your eye on that. And I would check that once every couple of months, because obviously as you add things to your website, it's possible that that's going to slow down the speed. So yeah, keep checking that. Website copy. This is an important one here, and I'll tell you what we tell our clients is pretty simple. We tell them, when you're writing the content for your website, forget about the search engines. Write it for your users, write it for your visitors, write it for your prospective customers. That's it. Forget about what the search engines think. You can go back and tailor it to the search engine later, but make sure, the last thing you want to have is a website that is clearly written for a search engine. Number one, it's hard to read for people that come to it. They won't stay, they'll leave. And number two, when Google sees you doing that, those flags start popping up again. They consider it spam, and your website could be penalized for that. So just write for your users, and then again, you can come back later on and look at your keywords and that kind of stuff. So point 2 here, study your competitors' websites. We mentioned that before, and what their results are. We spend a ton of time doing that. I mean, that's one of the best opportunities you have. Most of what your competitors are doing is available to you just by looking at their website or doing some searches for them. And you can really relatively easily reverse engineer a competitor's campaign to figure out what keywords they're targeting. And then, there are even tools that'll show you some of the links that they have pointing at them. It's easy to hide those, but they'll show you some of them. Things like that. I mean, the more information you get that way, then you'll know, okay, wow, here's a good starting place. I mean, they're doing this. They're obviously very interested in showing up for this keyword. I'm going to want to do that as well. So I think people skip over that a lot, but it's a great resource for you. Point 3, implement a quality link building or off-page campaign. In this day and age, you're not going to rank for anything without a good link building campaign. There's too much competition. Even in markets that are very niche these days, there's still so many pages that are competing for 10 spots on the first page that, like Rachel said, there may be a few out there that are so specific and niche and geo-targeted that you could rank for it, but there's really not going to be much search traffic in a case like that. So, the link building campaign, a lot of what you'll hear is content is king, and it is. You have to have good content. However, without link building, you're going nowhere. That's another takeaway here, hopefully, for you today. Add quality content where applicable. I mean, as much content as you're comfortable with. I would love to see 2,000 words on every page of a website. A lot of industries and businesses, it's not going to happen. I mean, there's not enough to say. The product is not something that's very descriptive, et cetera, et cetera. So, we have content. I mean, but you have to have some. Try to have at least 500 words if you can, and if you can get it up to 2,000, that's great. Another thing I would do with the content, I go back here to the competitors' websites, look at what they have, how much content do they have. If you go back and look at each thing, each item point by point, and look at the top 3 or 4 or 5 websites on Google, all of a sudden patterns will start showing themselves to you. So if I look and I say, okay, the top site has 1,800 words, the second site has 1,500 words, the third site has 1,000 words, there's a pattern, and you can work off of that. And all of these things, you can do that if you take the time to get involved with it. Constant monitoring of rankings for targeted search terms. This one can't be overstated because the algorithms change and your competitor strategies always change, particularly if they have a competent SEO company or consultant working for them. Their strategies will be changing all the time. So again, as we said before, this means that rankings are a fluid proposition. They fluctuate regularly and need to be maintained constantly. There are many tools that are available that you simply put your list of keywords in, and it will give you a report telling you where you rank, where you were compared to yesterday, where you were compared to last week, last month, last year, all kinds of things like that. For us personally as a company, we provide our clients with a copy of that report each month so that they know where they are and up and down. If you look at it every day, it will drive you crazy. I do it every day, and I can tell you I'm crazy. So, once a month is probably good. Once every couple of weeks, maybe on the outside. But again, just the point we're trying to make here is that this fluctuation is real, and things change constantly. So you have to be doing it all the time if you want to maintain success.
Okay, so you've talked about a lot of this, so I'm just going to...
Yeah, we talked about a lot of these already. So this is kind of like the order of importance. And again, we talked about it before. So, number 1 for your on-page would be title tags. 2 would be your header tags. 3 would be the actual content. 4 would be the alt image tags. 5, the frequency of the keyword. And I don't want to push on that one too much. That's not as important as people make you think it is, how often your keyword is mentioned in your text. It's important how often your keyword is mentioned in your title tag, in your header tag, in your image tag, much, much, much more than it is how often it's mentioned in the content itself. So just something to keep in mind there. And then number 6, your hyperlink text, which again is what we call your anchor text, and that should be pointing to the appropriate internal pages on your website. For off-page factors, anchor text of incoming links. So it's the same concept as the links that are on your own site. The sites that are linking back to you are also going to have anchor text. And it used to be, and not that long ago, 5 years ago, it used to be that if I wanted to rank for, landscaper in, Tustin, let's say, I would get a bunch of really good sites that Google liked to point back at me and have the links say landscape services Tustin or landscaper Tustin. And they would all say that. Google developed their, you probably have heard of their Penguin algorithm. They developed that specifically to combat that type of activity. So you can't do that anymore. You can't just pile the keyword over and over. I guess it's important to say at this point that if you're doing SEO, it's not that Google doesn't want you to do it, but people want to talk about, like, you've probably heard the phrases white hat and black hat and all that kind of stuff like that. If you're doing these types of activities, you need to understand that, you're not violating anything, but you're trying to, and here's that word manipulate again, but you're trying to control how your site performs in Google, which is what we're doing. It's what all your competitors are doing. It's what everybody does. Google doesn't love it, but it is what it is. So, they do. That's what these updates are for. They're constantly trying to stay ahead of people who are trying to scam them and game them, and there are a lot of people out there that do that, unfortunately. So, that's just something to keep in mind. Number 2 for off-page would be link popularity, or that's those votes for your site. So it adds credibility. That's a good word to use. It goes hand in hand with authority. Do they find you credible as a dentist, let's say, or do they find you authoritative as a painter, right? And if they do, then your site will generally rank well.
Okay. So, and understanding what a search engine sees. I mean, we do all these really pretty things for a good human experience, but a search engine is only looking at code. And so when it's looking at code, it's looking for code in very specific places. So like Chris said, for header tags, there's a specific area for that. There's code that designates what that is, and then you want to make sure that it's there, it's readable. And you want to make sure of many things about your code. I mean, one, that it's clean, so that it is readable. Also, that it's current. Code gets updated all the time, whether it's HTML or PHP or whatever it is. It's changing, and so code can go, quote unquote, bad. And when it's considered really old, Google doesn't like that, right? It punishes you for old code.
They don't.
Yeah.
Right. You would be devalued because of it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So again, it's just another one of those factors that you need to, keep in mind. Are you using code that is now considered bad code? And again, there are different tools that can be used to just assess your entire site, and part of that would include, they'll look at not just page load speed, but they're going to look for broken links, which is another thing Google really doesn't like. But if it finds broken links, it'll tell you where they are, so you can go in and fix the code. It'll tell you about old code. It'll tell you about a lot of things, but basically just keep in mind that Google is reading the code. It's not reading the page, and everything needs to be where it's supposed to be. It needs to be current and clean and accurate. Anything you want to add to that, Chris? Is that pretty much?
I think that about covers it. Yeah, I mean, it's relatively complicated, and you have to have a competent developer doing it, is the only other thing I would say. That's if there's any part of this deal I would not recommend trying yourself at home, it would be that.
Coding your own site.
Right. Unless you know what you're doing and you're trained in it. I mean, it's a very specific skill set.
Okay. And then before we talk about PPC versus organic, we got a good question that came in, which is, can you now talk about how Google's looking at mobile sites versus PC sites? Because the fact of the matter is that 60 to 70% of the U.S. population, and maybe even higher now because it was going up, is only accessing the internet through a handheld device, whether that's a tablet or a phone, or their Apple Watch, whatever. And so because of that, a lot of searches are now considered mobile. And more searches are certainly mobile than PC. And yet most people build their websites for a PC, and they think about everything from the perspective of a PC. But the reality is more visits are happening using a mobile device. So how does all of this change, if at all, when you think about mobile?
Sure, great question. The way that works, and you're right, everything you said there is right. The only thing I would add to what you said is that we see swings in different industries and different markets. So if I'm a restaurant, my mobile is going to be huge. If I'm somebody that makes underground water tanks, my mobile isn't going to be very much at all. So you got to establish that first. But that being said, you want to have a good mobile site no matter what at this point, because people do use mobile devices. So the way it works, just as an overview, is that Google has a separate algorithm for its mobile stuff. It recognizes when a site is mobile. It recognizes if a site has a mobile version or not. That's step one. So step one is to have a mobile version of your site. Amazingly, at this point, to me anyway, we still see quite a few folks that don't have mobile versions of their sites. If you don't have a mobile version of your site, you're not going to rank in mobile at all. So that's the first thing, have a mobile version of your site.
So let me say
And
that
from
again.
there,
I just want
frankly,
to highlight that point real quick. So if you don't
yeah.
have a mobile site, and if someone does know your URL address, meaning they know your website address, and they go to look it up on their phone or their tablet or their mobile device, they will get to you. So don't think that no one can get to you if you don't have a mobile version. They can get to you, but if they're searching for a service, let's say, if they're searching for, again, vet and Tustin, and they do that search on their phone, and you don't have a mobile device, you will not come up as a search result in that situation on a mobile device, because you don't have a good user experience for that searcher. And again, Google's credo is that they want to, create the best user experience for their users. And so if you're not going to give them a good experience on mobile, they're not going to serve you up as a search result. So people can get to your site, but you're not going to show up in the search results. So I just want to differentiate.
Right. Yep, that's important. And then going back to just follow up on that a little bit, I mean, as far as the search results go, once you have a mobile version of your site, again, there are certain criteria that you want to be looking at on the mobile version, and many of them are identical or very, very similar to what you would do with your PC version of your site. And so, it's less about building links, it's less about the off-page stuff and more about the on-page stuff. The page load speed is probably going to be the biggest thing there. If you have a mobile site that's loading slow, you're done. Don't even bother. It's got to be real, things like that. So think of it more as on-page stuff and less about off-page stuff. What we tell people is, look, if you have a mobile version of your site and your desktop site is properly optimized for Google's PC algorithm, then you'll generally do pretty well on Google's mobile algorithm. And that applies, 95+% of the time.
Well, especially, here's the thing about mobile sites too, is when you have a mobile site, you can literally have a separate mobile-friendly website that's designed specifically to show up only when someone is searching on a mobile device, and then your PC version shows up, and it's a separate website that shows up when someone's searching on a PC. So that is a little different, because you are then optimizing your mobile site completely separately from what's happening on your PC site, and you have to treat it as a completely different website. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have a website that's responsive, and what responsive means is that you've done all your search engine optimization on this one website, and when someone hits the website from a PC, then the display and everything is set up to be a great experience on a PC. However, that same website reorganizes its appearance and how it works when someone hits that same website from a mobile device. And so in that situation, all the SEO work you've done on your PC version is also going to apply to your mobile version, because it's literally the same site, right, and that same work has been done. What were you going to say, Chris?
And so the easy answer there is have a responsive website. I make the mistake a lot of times of assuming that everybody does, and that's true, everybody doesn't at this point, but you very much should have a responsive website at this point.
Yeah. Well, as a web development company, as you know, we see a lot of people also who back in the day, they created a separate mobile site, or they're just still using HTML that's not responsive, or they're in an old WordPress site that needs to be updated. If you are not responsive, if you are not mobile friendly, you need to fix it. So that's the bottom line. Okay, so PPC versus organic SEO. So some people really get confused in the beginning of what's the difference between a pay-per-click ad, which is what PPC stands for, or organic search engine optimization. So instead of reading through all this, do you want to just highlight the points that are?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not to say that we're down on pay-per-click. Our specialty is organic SEO. We use pay-per-click a lot. Here's the way to look at it. Organic SEO is the foundation of your online marketing campaign. It's always going to be, just for the fact that the percentage of people is so much greater that click on the organic ads than those who click on the pay-per-click ads. But that doesn't mean that there's not value in pay-per-click. It's great early in a campaign because you can do it right away, results in 1 to 2 days. Easier for a novice or someone with little knowledge of SEO. True from the SEO side, but you got to remember with pay-per-click, particularly with AdWords on Google, that's how they make their money. Okay, so their representatives who are helping you build your campaign and their little tools, those are not your friends; those are your enemy. And you got to be able to distinguish that. They want your money, and as quick as they can get your money, they will take it. And so you can't just go in there and just start buying keywords and bidding here and all that kind of stuff. You will lose your money and not get any phone calls. I can promise you that. You've got to have some knowledge before you start getting involved there. You can turn it on and off at any moment. Generally more costly per visitor and per conversion. It's because they don't convert as well. We find that AdWords, people that click on AdWords are more information seekers, tire kickers, and stuff like that. Easier to compete in a highly competitive market space, which that is a very good reason to use AdWords in a lot of cases. It will cost you. So if you're a personal injury attorney, let's say, there are cases where you might be paying $200 or $300 every time somebody clicks on your ad, but obviously that fits into your ROI and you get a big payoff once you land the client. So again, you want to be knowledgeable about what you're doing and not just throwing $200 away every time somebody clicks. But for me, that's one of the biggest, it really levels the field between a mom and pop shop and some of these bigger corporate type places. Ability to target local markets, that's great. You could do that with SEO too very well these days, but the targeting with AdWords is real good. You can do it by zip code, you can do it by radius around the zip code, so that's all good. And at the end of the day, it's better for a short-term and high-margin campaign. Whereas with SEO, the organic stuff, it does take a long time. It can take 3 weeks, 3 months, 12 weeks, or up to 10 months, 12 months sometimes. Again, if you're in an extremely competitive national market. Requires ongoing learning experience and testing, and there's that word, testing. That's the key to it, to achieve results. It is difficult to control the flow of traffic because once you're out there, you're out there. You're going to get traffic that's not good. You're going to get people you don't want. You're going to get spammers, but again, that's part of how it goes. Generally, it is more cost effective. Doesn't penalize you for more traffic. So once you're up there, all the traffic that comes in is, is yours. So like Rachel mentioned at the beginning of the call, as a long-term thing, it's much more cost-effective. It's just that you have to understand what you're doing is a long-term proposition and not something that's going to begin to work overnight. Whether you're doing it yourself or whether you have somebody doing it for you. So here's the actual numbers. So the SERPs, this is the organic results, are more popular than the sponsored pay-per-click ads, and the ratio is about 80-20. So 80% of people click on the SEO or organic listings, and about 20% click on pay-per-click. Now, there are so many searches on Google per day that 20% of 160 million or whatever it is still a whole lot. But that's your number, and that's why SEO in the long run is and needs to be the foundation of your online campaign. Very difficult to compete in a highly competitive market space. It is. Doesn't mean it can't be done. It certainly can. But you will have to invest more into it, and it can take a little bit longer. So you got to keep that in mind. But again, at the end of the day, you're going to get a better return on it if you're using organic. More difficult to target local markets. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think really the difference for me is a pay-per-click ad is a great way to test a new product or a new service or a new website out there while you're waiting for your SEO to kick in. It also, because you're paying for the ads to Google, they'll give you more data on what's working. They'll tell you specifically which keywords are driving which clicks or which phone calls, whereas Google doesn't share that level of information on the organic side because they want you to pay. So when you do pay-per-click and you get that kind of data, it helps you very clearly hone in on the keywords that are specifically generating clicks or calls for you. And then when you're fine-tuning your organic campaign, you already know from your PPC campaign what was working and really where to spend the money. So it's nice to launch with maybe a test campaign on pay-per-click, see what's working, see what's not working. Also, maybe you drive a ton of traffic to your website, but no one's converting. Well, that tells you before you keep spending a ton of money on traffic, you need to go fix your website and figure out how to make it convert. So it also lets you test whether your website's effective or not. So it has its place, but for long-term ultimately the higher ROI or return on your investment in digital marketing, I would put it in an SEO, because ultimately, again, the people that are looking to buy or just do their research are going to find you that way, and not only when you have not run out of bid money, but all the time. So that's why I like it better. I think we're gonna, because we're at the top of the hour, we're gonna move
along here. Yeah.
Last few ones. So,
all right, so this is kind of a recap here.
Yeah, I was just gonna say
go ahead.
Yeah, just use the appropriate keywords after you've done the research. Make sure that you do have content that 500 to 2,000 words per page, and do the internal hyperlinks, because it does show Google that everything is interrelated. Just don't go crazy with the keywords. Make sure, again, that you're focused on high quality inbound links. It does matter what the authority is of the links of the website that you're getting your links from. So you want to make sure that those are good, or at least not bad. Bad equals you losing authority and not ranking. And then you really just want to monitor what's working for you and what's not, and that's both your traffic and then which traffic is generating either the leads or the sales you're trying to produce, so you can spend more money on what's working and divert the money from what's not. Definitely want to educate yourself about white hat versus black hat. So white hat is when you're following rules that Google will not punish you for, and black hat is when you're doing things that basically, if Google knew you were doing them, they would punish you for them. And when they figure it out with their next algorithm release, you may have shot to the top of the search engine results, but you'll drop and disappear just as quickly when they figure it out. And so you want to, definitely not let your site get penalized. It's hard to recover from that. Always consider the fact that what they want is to deliver the best experience and the most relevant results to their searchers. So that means the website has to be fast, it has to be relevant, and it has to be a good experience for them. Because another thing that Chris didn't necessarily talk about but matters a lot is bounce rate. If people go to your website and what they see is not in line with what they were looking for, so when we talk about relevant, if I type in lawn care and I get a vet hospital, I'm immediately going to leave that website because it doesn't make any sense. Why was I shown it? And so what happens is Google looks at how often people are leaving that website immediately, and what they go is, well, this must not be relevant, so we're not going to rank it as high because people don't like it. So when they go there, they just don't think it's what they're looking for. So we're going to show them something else where they stay longer, they visit more pages, because clearly it's the right thing. It's what they were looking for. Tracking with Google Analytics. So Google Analytics is free. You have to just set up an account at analytics.google.com. They'll give you a code that your web developer or you can place in the code area of your website, and then it'll start to track for you visitors that come to the website, how many of them were typing in your specific URL versus maybe they came searching through a search phrase, where they're coming from, how long they stayed on your site, how many pages they looked at, whether they bounced off or not. Lots and lots of information, and you can also even set up what's called goals or conversions. So if you want to know how many people visited your website that made it to, that filled out a specific form, then you can track that as a goal or a conversion, and you can see, did most of those people come from Facebook, or did they come from Google, or did they come only when they already knew my website, and get some information that's going to help you with your marketing. you want to look at that, see what's working, what's not. Also, it's a free software, which is fantastic, except for from our experience, it frequently will stop working, and then you have to call them and get their help. Yeah, and because it's free, you can't do anything about it, and you can't necessarily get Google to move any faster. They're going to move. So if you're totally dependent on it, the hard part is that your hands are tied, and that's a challenge. This is our second to last slide, so I'm just going to, Chris, ask you to answer these really, really succinctly. But if you're going to hire a vendor, you want to ask them, what are you going to need from me to be successful? And what should their answers be, Chris?
Well, these questions in general, there's not a right or wrong, or, well, there could be a wrong answer, but something like, what are you going to need from me to be successful? That's important. And I think a good answer there is what we tell our clients is as little or as much as you can contribute. We can structure your campaign in a couple different ways. But we do need you to be paying attention. We do need you to understand how the process works. We do need you to be reading your reports and stuff like that. So I'd be looking for that there. Well,
and are you willing to make updates, to the website as necessary? Are you willing to let us make updates to that website for you, to go in and do it as we need to? If we need you to add content, if we need you to add pages, sometimes those things are needed to support the size of a campaign someone wants to do, or to go after specific keywords. So how do you measure your effectiveness?
And the answer to that would be through various types of reporting: Google Analytics, phone call tracking, and we can track forms that your prospects are going to fill out and stuff like that. And also how your keywords rank, how your traffic looks month over month, things like that.
So together, we usually will meet with a client and say, well, what are you trying to achieve? Why are we doing this campaign in the first place? And so it could be that they need phone calls. It could be that they want a form filled out, like you said. It could be that they just want people to learn about the brand. It could be that they want to sell a product. And so once we understand what the specific goal is, then we talk about a campaign that will support that. And then the reporting that we do can tell us, is it working or is it not working? You want to ask how the spammers are doing it, and go ahead. I'll let you answer, Chris. I like the answer, though.
Sure. Yeah, how are the spammers doing? The answer is that, and I'll speak for myself as the head of the search team here. If I don't know how the spammers are ranking number one, then how am I going to compete with them, right? So I have to know how they're doing. It doesn't mean I'm going to do it, but you have to know how they're doing it as well. So there's a good way to do it and a bad way to do it. You've got to understand both fully if you're going to be competing.
And when we look at your competitors, we can get a feel for, are they being legit or are they not being legit? So when you ask us, I want to beat Acme Company, we can go, well, let's see what Acme Company is doing. Oh, okay. Either this is legit, we can do this, or you know what, I don't know if they're going to make it because what they're doing doesn't look kosher. So, who's my point of contact? You just want to make sure you're talking to someone who's going to be able to, explain things to you clearly and answer your questions. And if you have someone who doesn't know, then, is fresh, then you just want to make sure you have access to someone else as well. What do you know about the recent Google algorithm updates? Chris has already mentioned to you that there were 4 a week in the past 3 weeks. So
in the last 3, and those were all little ones. And that's the thing, most people will be able to tell you about Panda and Penguin and the big ones, but there are a lot of little ones too, and you absolutely need to know about all of them. And that leads us right into the last question, which is how do you identify the cause of a penalty? And the right answer there is you see probably a drop in your traffic or your rankings. That's your first red flag. And then from there, you just have to sort of reverse engineer it. And again, it goes back to testing. You have to be able to test. So if there's an algorithm update, a large one, and we had a website that would drop, we would know that it dropped, know that the traffic dropped or whatever the case may be. But then we'd be able to go back to our testing and say, okay, we had some of our test sites here, look, this had the same problem, and here's why. This is what they have in common. Something like that. So something to do with testing is the right answer for that.
So the other question, the last question I want to ask you, and because I really want people to understand the implications of this, and then we'll wrap it up, is just there are a lot of people who start SEO and then go, oh, I don't have the time, the bandwidth to do it myself, or I don't want to spend the money it's going to take over the long term. So they try it for 2 months, 3 months, and then they just stop dead cold. And what's Google think about that?
Right. Well, you've got two problems right out of the gate with that, and we do see that sometimes. The first problem with that approach is that if you go 3 or 4 months, you've spent 3 or 4 months worth of your money for essentially probably not much, because it takes longer than that to get results. The other problem, which is a much larger problem, is that once you start doing SEO, Google gets used to what it's seeing on your website, okay, and happening to your website. It gets used to a pattern of links being created and links that are pointing to your site, and it's a consistent thing. So it may be, and again, it's different for every website, but it could be that there are 2 links a day coming in consistently, or there are 10 a week, or whatever it might be. It gets used to that over time, over a month, over 2 months, over 3 months. If that stops, all of a sudden, Google's algorithm will raise the flag and says something unnatural is happening here, and unnatural is the key. That's what they're looking for, unnatural tactics. So if it sees it stop, it goes, all right, that's unnatural, and eventually the site will start to fall back. Now, if you wait 6 months and then go, oh, geez, I'm going to start that back up again, now all of a sudden you have links coming back in. You have changes being made to the site. Now they put the big red flag up, and they say, you know what, there's a trust problem here. We don't trust this website anymore. And it's not that you're being penalized, but they don't find you to be an authority. They don't trust you, and it takes a long time to rebuild that trust. So if you started SEO and it took 3 months to get you results the first time, and you stopped for 6 months and started again, you can bet you it's going to take you 6 to 8, 9 months to get those same results the second time, just because you have to rebuild not only the trust that you had to begin with, but you have to overcome the fact that they saw something unnatural happening. So we very much, I mean, we can't overstate. If you're going to jump into this, make sure you're in it for the long run.
Yeah, I mean, we're always happy to help people, but what we can't stand is seeing people start and then stop before it has a chance to get results, and knowing that they're actually hurting themselves rather than helping. And that's why, so we really do say, whether we're starting and then you're going to pick it up or whatever the case is, it's just, you can't do this. If you're going to do something temporary, do pay-per-click advertising. That's what you should do.
That's right.
That makes sense for that particular strategy. All right, so I want to thank everyone for your time. I know that we ran a little bit over. Thank you for staying. And if you'd like a free SEO audit, or you had questions that we just ran out of time and didn't get to today, you are welcome to email me directly, rachel@artofonline.com. I will answer those questions for you, or you'll hear back from Chris if it's a technical question. And again, if you'd like a free SEO audit of your website, just send me an email with SEO audit in the subject, and with clearly in the body, please put the the website address you would like that search engine optimization audit for, and then we'll do that for free and send it back to you, and just have a phone call to go over what's working, what's not working, and what your options would be to correct it. Okay. So thank you so much for your time. I'll look for emails if you have any additional questions, and we hope that you enjoyed this webinar and learned what you came to learn. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.